Denver International Airport. I did a short write-up about this a few years back. Here it is. Denver International Airport, secret bunker, giant cult shrine, and potential concentration camp. There are a lot of conspiracy theories revolving around the Denver airport. There's no doubt that there are some odd things about the airport, from the delayed construction to the massive cost, to the odd choice of decorations. Opening on February 28, 1995, 16 months behind schedule, and at double the cost of the original estimate, $4.8 billion. Denver International Airport is the largest airport in the U.S. by total land area, 33,531 acres. Not long after it opened, wild conspiracy theories began floating around. One major theory is that there is a massive underground bunker that was built for the world's elite in the event of an apocalyptical event. Another is that there is a massive facility underneath that was built to be used as a concentration camp in the future. Some people believe that the reason for the delay in the schedule was due to the construction of said underground bunkers and tunnels. Supposedly, a construction worker claims that they buried 5 multi-story buildings underneath and built the airport on top of it. Aside from the construction theories, there's plenty of things inside the airport that are just plain odd. One thing mentioned often is the large Mustang statue outside of the airport, nicknamed Bluesfur, a large blue horse with red eyes that supposedly represents one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, death. Oddly enough, the architect who designed the piece was killed when the horse's head fell on him, severing major arteries and causing what proved to be fatal injuries. Another thing people find odd is the dedication stone inside the airport. One of the first things you notice is the large Freemason symbol in the middle of the stone. Another thing people point to is the date on the stone, March 19, 1994, which if you add up the numbers 191994, you get 33, which is a significant number in the Freemasons, as I believe it is the highest level you can reach in the organization. The last odd thing about the dedication stone is that it says near the bottom, New World Airport Commission contributors. People believe this is a reference to the New World Order, which will supposedly be brought on by the Freemasons and Illuminati. Also noted by conspiracy theorists are the 4 odd and slightly disturbing murals that are displayed in the airport. Some people believe these murals are packed with Freemason, iconography, and occult references, and even are a telling of the future. Strange business cards. I don't see them where I live now, but where I was living previously, there were a ton of these handwritten signs advertising that you call the number listed, and they'll pay you cash for your house. There were a few cars too, but probably 90% of them were something along the lines of, "We buy houses for cash with a number listed." No more context than that. They were all sloppily handwritten in black marker, with the phone number being the biggest thing on the sign. I fully believe that they posted to initiate some kind of secret meeting. They'd all pop up almost all at once, just everywhere, and then most would disappear a few weeks later, and then pop up again. The signs were so ugly that you'd have to be a complete idiot to think they're legit. These are actually for professional real estate companies, known as wholesalers. They enter an agreement to buy someone's house for cash, generally below market value, then sell that agreement to someone who actually wants to buy the house for a finder's fee. This is correct. Worked for one for about a month and was encouraged to put my phone number on signs around town. Popular since after the recession, and basically slaps a tax on whatever properties they get their hands on, thus artificially inflating the market. So it is a conspiracy in the sense that there are many people in on something slightly shady, but it isn't illegal and is fairly boring. Underground PR firms. There's an underground PR firm that helps celebrities fake their own death to escape the harshness of the limelight, as if they feel like their life is in danger. Some examples being Tupac, Biggie, Paul Walker, etc. As someone who works in PR, this is an interesting thought. Where do you think they go afterwards? A secret island? What about their families? I have a friend who came home from school one day to find their head dad disappeared. Government came and searched the house, took all his files and computers, and interrogated the family. They were a normal family with a lot of money, and have no idea why the government would have had anything to do with him. They never saw him again. A couple decades later, they see a man on Facebook who looks a lot like him in someone else's profile picture. He had a whole new name and family. When they tried to contact, all associated accounts were deleted. They still have no idea but assume he is in some sort of witness protection or running from Uncle Sam. Amelia Earheart was taken prisoner by the Japanese. There's another theory that she crashed on an island and starved to death. A skeleton from around the right time period was found, I think, and the flesh was eaten by coconut crabs. Really upsetting imagining a horde of giant monsters ripping her flesh off. Edit. A word. Edit 2. I didn't say the crabs ate her alive. I'm saying they might have eaten her body after she died, possibly from starvation or exposure. Of course, the most terrifying looking crab around too. Those things look like aliens in body armor. Yo, what the? Those are not acceptable. If they're really a meter diameter, then I'd need juggernaut armor from Call of Duty to even consider getting within a skipo's distance of them. Jeffrey Epstein is alive. Here I go. This needs to be brought back to everyone's attention. The entire Jeffrey Epstein thing. I actually believe this one to be true, unlike the 9/11s, QAnon, and other completely stories. As far as I can remember, QAnon was a 4chan prank, but the Epstein thing is so hard to not believe. My dad worked as a cop and seen quite a few bodies. Those bruises are really weird. It would make sense if the makeshift rope would move up his throat as more weight was dragging him down, but the marking on the front of his throat are too thin for a noose made out of clothing. Hanging aftermath have different bruises depending on what the instrument is, and this looks way too thin, almost like a wire. And he also had broken neck bones. There is no way he was going to be able to break his own neck, and while it is possible to hang oneself while your feet are touching the ground, it would require a much bigger drop to break the neck. Plus, why would the cameras not work in that exact moment? Why wasn't he under constant in-person supervision just in case, when they clearly knew that he could have possibly been a high-value target for some people? He got a good deal for the nameless and he just happens to finish himself right before he is supposed to give it in. Maxwell better have an armed guard on her at all times. Crack epidemic was planned. The CIA was involved in selling crack to low-income black neighborhoods to fund activities they couldn't get approved by Congress. I mean, I'm pretty sure most people believe there was some involvement and it's just a matter of degree, but I think they were nuts, deep in directly smuggling and selling crack through intermediaries to black communities with full knowledge of the Justice Department and executive branch to OOB. Edit. Dudes, I just want to clarify. The fact that the CIA was involved in some degree of drug smuggling is generally considered a well-attested fact. The degree to which they were involved in the proliferation of crack, the motivations behind this, and the degree to which the presidents knew of and condoned, or even ordered all of this, is a little more debatable. Gary Stephen Webb was at the center of this conspiracy, award-winning journalist that started his career in Ohio and Kentucky, and contributed to the Pulitzer Prize-winning coverage of the Loma Prieta earthquake, San Jose Mercury News. Webb had produced outstanding investigative reporting of the crack cocaine epidemic. He was able to, far beyond reasonable doubt, connect many dots between the CIA, FBI, and drug smuggling. Mythical great floods really happened. A massive electromagnetic storm or meteor hit the Earth about 12,000 years ago, melting the glacial ice sheets almost overnight and causing massive worldwide flooding. It would have caused a worldwide trauma in human thinking that could have rippled through generations of people in the form of strange traditions and religious beliefs. A lot of religious texts have accounts of mythical sounding flood, firestorm, or sky blackening events, and it would explain other things like a ton of the megafauna going extinct in North America, the discovery of civilization sites like Göbekli Tepe that are at least 10 to 12,000 years old, Plato's account of Atlantis being wiped out, and details that make it seem like the richest structure might be a really good candidate for the location of an actual place. My favorite rabbit hole by far. Edit. For all those wondering, I'm mostly just referring to the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, or the theory put forward by Robert Schoch detailing a possible solar maximum that created chaos electrical storms. Also look up videos from the geologist Randall Carlson. He has some great details about the ice core data and some satellite images of spots in the world that look like they have been marred by mega tsunamis in geologically recent history. John Anthony West has some pretty good info about Egyptians and rethinking what a lot of their records suggest. Graham Hancock is fun for speculation about the possible civilization and why he thinks some monuments are way older than we currently guess. All of them have been interviewed on JRE podcasts at least once and are excellent with any adult substance of choice in responsible amounts. As far as Atlantis goes, I know the commonly accepted theory is that Plato was talking about a fictional place. A couple of comments are saying he explicitly stated that in the book. I don't remember that part, but it has been a while, so I'll double check. But there are also older maps that show Atlantis in the NW part of Africa right below the Atlas Mountains. Near there is a natural formation called the Richet Structure, or the Eye of the Sahara. It looks pretty interesting in Google Earth. It is not too hard to imagine before a large climate catastrophe that its lower lying rings could have been filled with water and connected to a waterway that could easily access the ocean. Plato does have quite a fairly amount of detailed information that he said was passed down to him from Solon, and was originally in an Egyptian temple documenting the history of Atlantis. The description matches word for word to the site with fairly eerie accuracy from what I can tell. For example, the 3 colors of the stones in the city. On the ground at the Richat, there is rubble everywhere with those 3 exact colors. There are also specific distances in Plato's account when he talks about the layers of the city and its ring-like shape. They match really well with this natural structure. I'm not sold on the Atlantis part, but it is really fun. I also took out the phrase, possible nuclear winter-like effects, at the end of the first paragraph. Multiple people correctly pointed out that was inaccurate. I was trying to think of a quick well-known phrase to describe the particulates that would have spread around the world. I believe at some point Randall Carlson talks about a layer of these particulates in the geologic record suggesting an impact or other high-energy event. Nanodiamonds, melt glass, and things that come from high pressures and heat. Don't know if I have those terms correct from memory. Finland doesn't exist. During the Cold War, Japan struck up a deal with the Soviet Union for exclusive fishing rights to an area of sea between the Soviet Union and Sweden, with the Soviets getting a tasty share of the profits. To stop other countries getting into this area, they put out false reports of a country there called Finland. Get it, Finland, because of the fish. Haha, very clever. But surely there are people living in Finland, you say. Heck, you may have even visited Finland yourself. No, you see, in reality, the people who think they are Finnish and living in the fictitious Finland actually live in a series of remote villages spread across Russia, Sweden, and Estonia, and are fooled into believing that they are in Finland. If you yourself have ever visited Finland, you are actually flown to one of these other locations and lied to by the airlines, who are all in on it, of course. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, and I love it. There were more people involved in the Oklahoma City bombing. Everyone should watch the John Ronson Secret Rulers of the World documentaries, specifically the Oklahoma City bombing episode. If you were alive when the OKC bombing happened, you probably remembered that for days or weeks after the bombing, they were showing those police sketches on the news of John Doe number 1 and John Doe number 2. Asking for the public to help identify them. Number 1 was pretty obviously Tim McVeigh, but McVeigh got arrested. We had a whole trial, conviction and execution, and somehow John Doe number 2 never came up. Never on the news again after McVeigh's arrest, never mentioned during the trial. The biggest manhunt and prosecution in US history at that time, and there was an accomplice who just got away. Terry Nichols got convicted for helping build the bomb, but we know for sure he wasn't with McVeigh that day. So what happened to John Doe number 2? Did the feds and local police just forget about him? Well, at the time, the FBI told the public that John Doe 2 was a case of mistaken identity, and he was just a random guy who happened to have been in the Ryder rental place at the same time as Timothy McVeigh, and a witness mistakenly thought they were together. Then in 2011, the FBI declassified a bunch of the files related to the OKC bombing investigation, and it turned out that they knew all along that John Doe 2 wasn't this random guy mistakenly associated with McVeigh. In fact, witnesses from that morning had seen this John Doe 2 with McVeigh in the Ryder truck when they pulled over to ask for directions to the Murrah building, and a security guard saw John Doe 2 on a surveillance camera getting out of the truck after McVeigh parked it outside the building. That tape was confiscated by the FBI, and ever since they've denied its existence, and all we have is local news interviews from the time with the security guard who watched the tape and the witness who gave them directions. So John Doe 2 was with McVeigh on the day of the crime with the murder weapon, and the FBI knew about it and did nothing. There are different theories about who John Doe 2 was, but from the John Ronson documentary and information from other sources like antiwar.com and Mother Jones, I've come to the conclusion that John Doe 2 was probably this guy named Andreas Strasmeyer, who had lived in a white separatist compound called Elohim City with McVeigh as his roommate. A few days before the bombing, McVeigh was filmed in a strip club with another man where they bragged to the strippers that they were going to be famous in a few days. People think this other man was Strassmeyer because the man at the strip club with McVeigh had a German accent, and Andreas Strassmeyer was a German national. There is other circumstantial evidence pointing to Strassmeyer, not the least of which is his striking resemblance to the John Doe sketch. But why did the manhunt just stop? Why didn't John Doe number 2 ever come up in trial? The evidence suggests he was probably some kind of intelligence asset who was spying on the white separatist compound for the feds and the FBI. Didn't want his involvement to become public knowledge. Strassmeyer has given only one interview in the years since the bombing, and in it he claimed that he came to the U.S. after being discharged from the German army to seek employment with the U.S. federal government, specifically the alphabet agencies, the ATF, the FBI, CIA, etc. Strassmeyer claimed he was turned down by these organizations, but just months after his arrival, he started showing up at gun shows in the middle of the U.S. from Texas to Idaho, trying to buy guns and promoting white supremacist ideology and networking. It was at one of these gun shows that he met Tim Tuttle, aka Timothy McVeigh. Strangely, Strassmeyer's father Gunther was Germany's finance minister under PM Helmut Kohl, right after the unification of Germany, and was one of the most famous politicians of that era of German national politics. How does someone go from German political royalty to wanting to work for the FBI, to being neck-deep in white separatist compounds and American heartland far-right extremism? Well, most likely the feds recruited him to infiltrate these groups as an undercover informant. There is other evidence, which is pretty overwhelming, that the feds had more than enough intel to stop the bombing ahead of time and chose not to act for some reason. The ATF had recruited a woman named Carol Howe as an informant months before the bombing, at a time when she was hanging out or living with McVeigh, Strassmeyer, and the other white separatists. She filed multiple ATF informant reports saying that a bombing was imminent. She had seen them working on the bomb, and she had in fact driven with them to scout out targets in Oklahoma City, including the Murrah building. You can still find copies of some of her informant reports online, and she was interviewed on local and national news. So the feds had at least 2 informants right in the center of the bomb plot. Sounds like you'd want to have these people testify at McVeigh's trial, right? Well, Strassmeyer flew back to Germany within days of McVeigh's arrest and has never returned or even been sought by the feds. Instead of calling her to testify, the feds arrested Carol Howe just days before the trial on trumped-up federal charges and gave her some diesel therapy, shipping her to different federal lockups all over the country until the trial was over. As soon as McVeigh was convicted, her charges were dropped and she was released. Clearly, the federal government didn't want their testimony coming out in court, and even Terry Nicholas, the only living man to be convicted of crimes related to the bombing, has said repeatedly through his lawyer that there were other accomplices involved in the plot. You can also find interviews his lawyer has given on this subject. So at least one accomplice in the biggest domestic terror attack in American history was just memory hold for an entire country. How does John Doe go from the subject of the biggest manhunt in U.S. history to a forgotten footnote that only conspiracy theorists then know or care about? The Ronson documentary covers most of this, but it came out before the FBI document declassification, so it doesn't cover that part. But if you want to learn about this subject, that's a good place to start. Inner Earth's civilizations. Inner Earth is a cool one. There are theories that numerous break away. Civilizations are living deep in the earth. They have been around for a long time and are far more advanced than anything on the surface. They have crazy technology and basically created their own little utopias down there. It's theorized that some of the UFOs people are always spotting aren't from another world, but from these inner Earth civilizations, especially the ones that have been spotted around nuclear missile silos. They only show an interest in us when we look like we're going to be a problem for them. Supposedly one of these inner Earth colonies are an offshoot of Atlantis, and they moved underground because of the last cataclysm around 10,000 years ago that wreaked havoc on the surface world. Various governments have taken this concept pretty seriously and sent people to investigate. If you're interested in this theory, a good starting place is Admiral Byrd's expedition to Antarctica. He was a highly decorated member of the military who went to the Arctic to investigate Nazi bases and claims to have encountered of these inner Earth colonies. His story is really interesting. It's a cool rabbit hole to fall down and honestly not that crazy of a concept to me. Companies sell DNA data for biological warfare. DNA companies to either see if you have a disease or to track your heritage. Race are put in place by the government or very powerful people as an excuse to capture your DNA, potentially to create a DNA-specific disease, chemical warfare, or for other potentially ominous reasons. If Uncle Sam asked us all to willingly submit our DNA for tracking purposes, there would be extreme pushback and rioting and a right to privacy protest. With a little bit of fancy marketing, not only are people giving it up, but they are actually paying to do so. There are no laws or policies that protect the information about our DNA that we willingly submit to non-medical companies. Not even the ones testing for allergies or diseases are covered by HIPAA, which means that at any given point, all of that information could be sold to the highest bidder without any consequences. The food pyramid is inaccurate and biased. The recommended food pyramid is created by the FDA, but the FDA is funded by a lot of certain food industries like poultry, dairy, etc. They in turn made the recommended nutrition based off of their funding by these companies and not based on a well-balanced diet. I don't know about the newer version, but I'm pretty sure this was actually confirmed to be the case with the old version. Most people learned. That's why grains are on the bottom, below even vegetables. There was an episode of The West Wing where they were redoing the pyramid into a plate, for portions of the plate and a glass of milk to the side. They had to scrap the idea because the cheese lobby was pissed that milk was being represented as the only dairy in Wisconsin as a swing state.